Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first Elevate Your Equity podcast. My name is Derek Clifford, and
I'm Sophie Lauren Clifford.
And it's great to be here with you guys. We're so excited to kick off our podcast with a bang. And really, what we wanted to do this very first podcast is give you guys a little bit of an intro for where we're coming from, why we're doing this, and who we are. Just give you guys kind of a rundown of what it is that we want to try to do with this podcast. So I think what we'll do is we'll do what most people do when they first start out a podcast and are introducing themselves to each other. We'll start a little bit about what it is that we're doing and then why we're doing it. You want to kick it off?
Sure. It's really, really exciting to be able to do this with your significant other. So this is something that we've been talking about doing for a really long time. We just finally decided to get it on our schedule and make it happen.
The reason that we're doing this podcast is we want to be able to provide a perspective from two different types of people that want the same thing. And why do it? Because in order to make real estate investing happen, it takes focus, it takes energy. It also takes knowing the numbers and knowing the mechanics. But I would almost say that the mindset and understanding what it is that you're going to be facing is more important than understanding the general mechanics. Because if you're ready for it, you can learn anything. It's just like if you're a quick learner, you don't need to go to college in order to get into a job that you really want. There's so many stories of people with philosophy degrees. My dad's colleagues in his W-2 at work that got philosophy degrees, but now they're working in the computer science field. So if you can show that you have the ability to learn and the ability to stick with it in real estate, the knowledge, it's important to understand that, the basics, but real long-term success comes out of your mindset. And so that's one of the things that we need to impress upon.
Absolutely. And with this podcast, we just want to be able to share our story and our journey. And we shared a little bit of it. And, as we continue to do more episodes, we'll continue to talk about what we learned along the path, all of our mentors that we met, and just all of the nuggets of wisdom that we picked up along the way. And one of the main things that I learned on this whole journey is that anything is possible. And there's always solutions. So like Derek mentioned, there's always a solution. Every time we hit a dead end, we always found our way out of it. And I thought, okay, well, if we can get through all that, then we can get through anything, or at least we can figure it out.
Right. So I think, touching and expanding on Sophie's point, right? In order to have the right mindset, we need to be able to understand different perspectives. And this show is for working people and couples that are looking to invest in real estate. And even though you may be sitting there listening to this podcast, thinking that, I'm by myself, I'm not in a relationship yet, or my spouse doesn't care what I do, you have to keep in mind that whatever you do with real estate investing or investing in general is going to affect other people sooner or later at one point. You're going to be affecting yourself, your partner, your parents, your kids, or whoever your heirs are going to be, and even your tenants and your property managers and everyone, right? So the value in this podcast is that Sophie and I are night and day when it comes to a lot of different things, right? And this podcast is going to offer you two different perspectives on any topic that we're going to be talking about. If we have guests on, Sophie will be looking at it from her perspective of, okay, how much time is this going to take? The high level perspectives, how much risk are we willing to take? Why does this make sense? Whereas I'm going to deal mostly with the nuts and bolts, trying to dive down into the details and how it works and what criteria makes it happen and all that good stuff. And every once in a while, we're going to cross over into each other's area of expertise. But I think that this is a really great way for all types of people, including couples who have a shared financial picture together, to be able to look at different people and perspectives in a different light and be able to honor that and really respect that. Because when push comes to shove, my opinion is that we invest passively and we try to achieve greatness together so that we can have more time and more choices and more freedom to spend, right? But if you're out of balance and you're spending too much risk, too much time, too much energy in real estate, and you're not paying attention to your partner or your family, pretty soon you're not going to have that anymore. So it's really important to be well balanced and understand these perspectives, because being able to relate with other people and being able to understand what direction to come at things to find a solution, and being able to stick to it, and being able to really tackle problems together in a collaborative way, or take a step back and look at it from a different way, is going to be really helpful for you, our listeners. So we hope that you find that useful.
Very well said.
Is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
I don't think so. I think that it's going to be an interesting journey forward for us and hopefully for you, our listeners, because our story continues to evolve. And we're nowhere near where we want to be yet, but I think it's very, very important to talk about and reflect on the journey that we've come along so far, so that we don't take anything for granted, and we share our experiences and what we've learned to and add as much value as we can to others.
Yeah, 100%. I think that giving back is just as important as succeeding yourself. That's something that I've learned as well, because I've been spending the past 5 years learning as much as I can about real estate. And I always thought that it would just be for me, for myself. But I'm finding that the most joy that I get is out of sharing this passion with other people and helping people succeed. We've done it before. Sophie's mom actually has been completely retired because of the power of real estate investing. We have friends who have built a massive portfolio out of state, and they're 1 foot out the door from retiring from their very high paying job. And then of course we are examples ourselves, like we're on our path as well. And we've met so many people that have already done it before. And so we want to help you do that too. So what you can expect from the show is we're going to be bringing on experts, as well as just talking amongst ourselves. We're going to be sharing our experiences too, and maybe even going into a few deep dives just to help you. But we're going to be bringing on experts, and we're going to be talking with them in a standardized format that's free flowing. We have general questions that we're going to be asking every guest. And we're going to let the conversation go where it needs to go so that we can explore the topics that are most important to you and to us. Most likely, if we are interested in it, then you guys probably are as well. And just very excited to be doing this. Not very many podcasters have this type of format where they're going on with their significant others. And I think this is going to be a fun project for just my wife and I in general, even if there's no listeners out there.
So I'm Sophie, like I said, and by training, I'm an integrative medicine doctor, and I have a private practice. And by accident, I became a real estate investor. So that was an interesting story. That's how we both got started. I grew up watching my parents invest in real estate, but it wasn't as smooth. It wasn't as fun. And I never thought that I myself would get into it. But when I went to graduate school in Seattle, I decided, hey, this might be a really good opportunity to purchase a property, to live in it for a few years, and then to sell it after I graduate, and then just pay off my student loan debt. So it sounded very logical, sounded very rational at the time. But what I didn't know was that I didn't know anything about market timing. And I bought it right before the 2008 recession, actually closed on it the month before, so June 2008. And what ended up happening was it was so underwater that we ended up having to, if we wanted to sell, write a check to walk away from it. So once I got a residency in California, I thought, okay, well, there's no way that we're going to be able to sell this. So Derek had a great idea, and he said, hey, why don't you rent it out to medical students? And that's what we did. And it was a first time in everything, first time in renting to tenants, first time in taking applications, the first time managing it out of state. And overall, it went really well. Found two great students in their first year, so they stayed in there the whole 4 years. I ended up just leaving it furnished, and they really were honestly the best tenants that we could ever ask for. And it made real estate investing, it made our intro to real estate investing so easy, so simple. And we thought, hey, we can do this forever. And once we moved to California, we decided to make it happen again. And we decided to buy another property in Antioch, California. And so I'll let Derek talk more about this story, because this is where it gets more interesting.
Interesting is a good word. That is a good word to describe it. Well, just to back up, and thank you for sharing that. That's good stuff. I'm sure the audience is very interested to hear more about your story too. But just to back up, my name is Derek Clifford, and I am a real estate investor as well. Hi, Derek. And I have been investing part-time for nearly 4 years now, or 5 years, depending on how you slice that. I grew up in Los Angeles and in Colorado Springs area. I went to school as an engineer, a chemical engineer actually, and got a job out of school in Houston, Texas, and started working on refineries and did lots of sized equipment and did lots of mechanical work inside of plants, or oil refineries themselves. And then eventually met Sophie and flew all the way out to Washington, got a job out there, and that's where we got engaged. And then that's when Sophie's story about that condo up in the Northwest started to take hold. And that's where really the curiosity for me about real estate kind of all began. I really wanted to get more of a foundation to try to do this with actual intention, instead of just kind of stumbling into it like what we did when we were in Washington. And once we started to put all the pieces together, it took a lot of time. And eventually I just figured, like, man, I've been studying real estate for years. I was on BiggerPockets, and I went to a whole bunch of meetups in my local area, and just got more and more interested about the promise of passive investing through real estate. And once I figured that I had been doing nothing for about a year, I figured it was time for me to take action somehow. So as Sophie was alluding to, we decided to purchase a property as a rental in one of the growing areas in the Bay. It's a place called Antioch. So for those of you listeners who are familiar with the Bay Area, you know that back in 2015, when we first started this journey, it was pretty rough to invest in that area, but we decided to invest in a spot that was a little bit cheaper, and Highway 4, which is the major artery highway in that area, was expanding. So we had a mind shift. We kind of understood that, from theory to execution is two different things. And so we started our journey out on that property. We purchased the property with, I think, 5% down, telling the bank that we were going to be moving into it as a primary residence, and then actually turning around and renting it out as well. So, but that was a very interesting experience. And I think from there, let Sophie take it a little bit from here, because she was really, really involved in a lot of the conversations with the tenants up front. And once we closed, we worked together on the rehab. And so I want to hear her take on how that whole experience went from beginning to end for that property.
It was definitely harder than I expected. And remember, coming off of the Seattle property, we just thought it was going to be so easy.
A breeze.
Right? You buy the property, you fix it up as much as it needs, get a tenant in there, they pay their rent, we pay the mortgage, and hopefully that there's a little bit of extra money that can go towards other things. But it wasn't that way. There was a lot of things that had to be done. I thought it was going to be really, really easy, just like my last property. And instead, we ended up having to paint the whole thing. We had to redo all the ducting. We had to rip out all the carpeting. And most of the stuff that we learned to do, we learned through YouTube. And it was, in a way, it was fun, right? It was fun to learn new things, but it was definitely hard work. There was a lot of sweat equity that we put in there. And we found ourselves working after we got done with our full-time jobs. We went there after we did whatever we need to do. And then we did work on the weekends. And I think we spent how long? Like about a month getting it ready?
Yeah, it almost took us almost a month and a half, I think, with all of the landscaping we had to do in the front yard, all the vendors that had to come in. I think we also had like rodents or some sort of like some sort of foreign animal infestation type of situation at the property.
And there was this odor that we couldn't
that's
pinpoint.
right. I remember that. I think it was cat urine, or it was either a cat or dog for sure. But they tell you later on in the business that once you smell the cat urine or dog urine as you walk into a property, the first thing you should say is, it smells like money.
And it wasn't.
No one will buy it. No one will buy that property.
And that's definitely true. And it was one of those odors that you couldn't really get out with just carpet cleaner. It was like entrenched in the padding underneath the carpet. So
no, it was actually in the floorboards below that. Like it was past the padding. It was down in the subfloor. And so there was something like we had to go in there and use chemical spray. I think at the time we weren't sophisticated enough to go in and actually like replace the floorboards, but that was pretty crazy.
Yeah. And I mean, overall, I felt like the end product, all the time and energy we put in, the end product looked pretty good. And it was something that we were really proud to rent out. So when the time came to set up applications and, figure out how do we even advertise this property on Craigslist, we thought, okay, the hardest part of this whole journey is over. We just need to get tenants. So we did get tenants in the first family. I don't know if you want to talk about the whole application process or if we want to even get into that.
Yeah, sure. So, obviously we've been doing our research. We've been finding out ways to screen tenants. You have to do an eviction check. You have to do a background check, and you have to run their credit, right? So those three things we had help with online. We did all those things. And the first tenant that came in, like it was kind of borderline-ish. But our primary mistake is that we did not hire a property manager because we're in the California area. The mortgage that we had was so big that we couldn't afford a property manager with our numbers. And that was really the mistake number one. But that was something that we kind of knew going into it, just because we knew we wanted to take some sort of action and we wanted to learn, right? So that's what we did. And when the first tenants came in, everything was good for a little while. But, a couple months into the process, like I remember them saying, "Thank you for taking a chance on us." And those words, "thank you for taking a chance on us," is something that I'll look back on because that's the exact same phrase that was used again with our second tenants. Anyway, to finish the story, the first tenants that came in there, they paid rents for a little while and then they stopped paying around, I think it was November or December, because I think that we were away at the time. And they said something about, having issues with a family illness or, not having work or something like that, which we don't know is true or not. And so we granted them, I think, like a month or so of free rent. And then after that, we understood where this was going and the tenant caught on that we knew. And so we had to offer them what's called cash for keys, where we just said, "You know what? We'll pay you. Just give us the keys so that we can get someone else in here to go." And they said, "Deal." And we got them out. The second set of tenants, the same pattern kind of ensued. But there were a little bit more red flags. And these tenants ended up becoming quite a problem because after the first ones moved out, I remember we had to go in there and fix some things up. And it was already a really nice property. We had everything trimmed and manicured and, everything was good to go. I think we redid some flooring, or there was something that we did to improve the property. And when these tenants got in there, they seemed to be really nice. But one of the people one of the tenants, I guess the partner, the wife, she was never around for any of the screening or anything like that. It turns out that they turned out to be what was called professional tenants, which are people that take advantage of all of the landlord laws that the state offers, and really twists things to try to basically not pay rent over a while.
Maybe you can talk about some of the initial things that were red flags that we didn't know about because we were just starting out, like how their last names were different or how.
Yeah, so a couple of things that really stood out to us was, you know, their credit score was kind of low. It was like in the 500s or something like that. And there was no history at all for any, like no history of it. Like a lot of stuff was just clean. Like there was no, it was a blank slate on a lot of stuff. And there was always mention of just one person. There was never any, there was two people that were on the lease, but like what we understood was that this secondary person didn't have a bank account or didn't have anything, didn't have a job or anything like that. And they made enough to qualify based on this guy's job. And, you know, going through that, like seeing that some of the information was missing, some of the communication, the words, thanks for taking a chance on us. Those things were like little red flags that we more or less, we either didn't see them at the time or they just went right over our heads. And then looking back in retrospect, like those were clear signs that this was not really the right tenant. But you know, when you're in this type of situation, you're desperate to get the property rented because remember, like you got to still pay a mortgage.
Initially, too, I remember they were just paying straight cash, and they were
That's right.
They were just depositing cash straight into our bank account, or sometimes we'd have to meet up with them, and they'd hand over $2,300 in cash.
Yeah.
And at that time, I thought, oh, well, that's great to be getting cash, but there was no paper trail. And I think that was something that we learned after that experience.
That's right. So, you know, after the way that whole experience ended, when we had them in there, they paid for, I think, another like 4 months or something like that. And then a very large eviction battle started to ensue. And in the state of California, because the laws are so tenant friendly, even with us trying to read all of the paperwork online ourselves, we had to end up getting an eviction lawyer who specializes in these things. And because we didn't do the process correctly from the beginning, we had to start all the way from scratch. And luckily we hadn't gone that far down the path. I think we were only a couple of weeks down the path after they had missed rent. We had put the 3 notice to pay or quit. And then apparently the way we posted it wasn't right, or the wording that we had on there wasn't correct. So our eviction or our attorney helped us figure out the right way to get all that paperwork started, and we paid them quite a bit. And everything all said and done, it costed us about, you know, with all the missing rent and with the mortgage payments that we had to pay and all the damages to fix the property once we moved out, it took about $10,000 or $12,000, I think, was what they owed us.
It was quite a bit, and we still haven't seen a penny of what they owed us.
And we probably won't ever.
So that was our first California rental property. That didn't deter us, so we continued. We thought, hey, you know, this is just a fluke. And so we decided to just keep continuing our investment journey. And we ended up, well, after we got married, at the time, we were living with 3 other guys in the master bedroom, just to save money. But at that point in time, we thought, hey, it's time to find our own house to live in. And we went house hunting for our own space. We ended up finding a house, actually a great house. We were driving around and we saw a house in Pleasant Hill, which is still in the Bay Area. And it wasn't on the market yet, right? It was by appointment only, and it said coming soon. When we drove past this particular property, we saw that there were people, it looked like they were moving out. So we went up to talk to them and we said, hey, can you tell us as much as you can about this property? we might be interested in purchasing it. So it turned out they were renters. They were renting the in-law unit. And this house, it was actually from the outside, it looked like it was two properties. When you go inside, it was a main house, 3 bedrooms, 1 bath, and it had an excellent in-law unit over the garage. And it was a 1 bedroom, 1 bath with a full kitchen, full living room. And we thought, hey, we can actually, because we were so used to living in small spaces at the time, we thought, hey, why don't we live in, if we buy this place, we can live in the in-law unit and rent out the main house. Of course, the main house needed a lot of work. And it was strange because it was a 3 bedroom, but it only had 1 bathroom. So houses built back in the 1940s, it was very common for them to have 1 bathroom for 3 or 4 bedrooms. So we decided this would be a really, really great opportunity to see if we can fix this up and rent out the main house, and hopefully what the rent that we would get would pay off the mortgage so that we would end up living for free. Later on, we came to find that this was called house hacking.
Yeah, so this house hacking situation was absolutely perfect for us. Of course, we had to borrow and we had to really scrounge our way to actually buy this house, because when it was first listed on the market, it was coming soon. But we called the broker or the agent right away and said, hey, you know, we're interested in this thing. We'll give you guys exactly what you want at asking. And, you know, a few conversations later with, you know, our family helped us get the cash that we needed in order to close with 20% down. And then we also had to do some rehab as well. We had to do a little bit of work because there needed to be some stuff. There was some stuff wrong with the drainage and the roof. And also we wanted to open up the main entrance. And so there were some things that we had to do with that property. But we stuck with it. And eventually we found ourselves in a house hack situation, as Sophie was talking about, where we were actually living in the additional unit above the garage, and we were renting out the main house. So it's kind of creative in the fact that it's just Sophie and I. We don't have any kids yet, so, or at least at that time we didn't really have any kids. So it just made sense for us to live in a small 600 square foot area while, you know, we rent out the main house, and we're able to get most of the money that we needed to pay the mortgage in rent. And then that, you know, combined with the fact that we could pay back, you know, our family with some of the money that came in over time, it just felt like it was a win-win situation. So we ended up house hacking this property for a little bit. Yep.
Yeah. And we learned a few ways because the market at that time was pretty competitive. So what we did was we saw that it wasn't on the market yet. And we called the broker, like Derek said, and we offered full price. But the one thing that we did learn was we ended up using the seller's agent as our agent. And so another thing that Derek did that I thought was really, really smart at the time was he went through the house. Actually, we hired an inspector. So he took the inspection report and he went through and line itemized all the things that needed to be fixed, and then wrote exactly how much each of those things would cost to be fixed, and said, hey, this is, you know, I think at the time it was $40,000. So gave that over as a negotiating bit for either credit or cash back, or, you know, cash or a discount on the price. And the owners ended up just writing us a check for $40,000. And that added to the rehab fund that we needed to just start getting the house in motion.
That's right. A little bit of creativity, you know, and just the lesson here, I think, was just be willing to ask the question, right? Because a lot of people, when they're buying an investment property, sometimes they're afraid to ask questions because they don't know. But the worst that can happen is someone can say no. Most likely, you know, other investors or sellers will be wanting to they're committed to get the deal done because you're under contract. So they want to help move the process along. And so that's kind of something that we had learned mid-flight. And we just tried something. I just didn't know whether or not we were going to be successful or not, but it wouldn't hurt to at least assert ourselves in that position. So that's what we did.
Looking back, I really, really loved all the trial and error components that we did, because it was, like I said, it was the first for a lot of different things. And at that time too, I mean, it was a pretty major rehab for that particular house, because we ended up having to take down walls. It was our first time working with a contractor. And of course, it's very, very challenging to find good contractors who aren't going to rip you off,
Yeah.
who are going to be honest with you, and who actually help walk you through the rehab process. And so we found a great contractor at the time who was recommended by the agent, the real estate agent. And he was part of our learning journey, because he taught us what we had to do to get renters in, how to rental proof the property. And one of the biggest lessons I remember is that when I went in to pick the granite, when I went in to pick the paint, I wanted to pick things. I wanted to pick colors that really spoke to me. And the contractor said, listen, you want to pick the most neutral colors, because all the colors, everything I picked had a little speck of pink, or it was on the more peachy side. And so this contractor taught us so much. He really taught us how to think as an investor instead of as, as using this as a personal property. And then that was really helpful.
Yeah, I think that keeping the right perspective was really important, and having his perspective from what he's seen before for investment properties, it was really great to be able to ask him questions. And I think that was really important for us. And, we ended up living there and had renters come in and out for, I think it was 2 or 3 years where we lived in that property. But at the time, our personal situation was such that I had to drive quite a bit. Like, as a matter of fact, it was only 15 or 20 miles away, but I had to spend about an hour in traffic or leave really, really early in the morning in order to get to work on time. So we decided to move. And when we moved into a rental situation closer to where my work was, and we decided to sell that property. And selling that property became the basis for our portfolio of an 18-unit multifamily in Indianapolis. And then some of the things that we skipped over is, while we were in that Pleasant Hill house, living in the additional dwelling unit, the ADU, above the garage, that 600 square foot place with a wall mount AC and with a furnace in the middle. When we lived in that place, that's where we really focused on our mindset and really got doubled down. Like, both of us got really involved in organizations that help grow your mindset and help you set goals and help figure out what it is that you're going to be doing with intention. So it was there at that property where we really started to focus on our Indiana investments. And at that time, that's also when we liquidated our house in Antioch with the 2 tenants that we told you about that we had to take to court, and cash for keys. And so that's really what kind of propelled us and launched us into our career. But other than that, that's it. Just want to conclude by saying that this is going to be a show by couples and for couples as well. Again, if you are married out there, you have some interest in investing in real estate, or you already have real estate that's either not going well, we're here for you. That's really what we want to speak to, is those folks who are interested in expanding their holdings and getting themselves off to passive income success and financial freedom, really, to enable a life of full choice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well said. And it's going to be fun for both of us.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you guys so much for listening. And we appreciate all of those who've listened all the way to the end here. You guys are great. We look forward to talking to you again next time. So until then, please keep in touch, and we will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.